They were newlyweds, a young Canadian couple, celebrating what was supposed to be the happiest night of their lives. Emma and Lucas had planned every detail of their wedding, every moment designed for joy, love, and celebration. But in a shocking turn of events, the night ended in unimaginable tragedy. One impulsive reaction, one moment of horror, forever changed lives. What really happened behind closed doors that night? Stay with us as we uncover the chilling story of love, betrayal, and the deadly consequences of a single impulsive act. Emma Sinclair and Lucas Porter were, by all outward appearances, the perfect couple. Both in their late 20s, they had met through mutual friends in Toronto, Canada, and quickly fell in love. Their courtship was the kind that others admired: dinners at quiet bistros, weekend getaways, and a relationship filled with excitement and promise. Friends described Emma as warm, intelligent, and full of life, while Lucas was seen as charming, ambitious, and deeply devoted, at least on the surface. The couple's engagement had been celebrated with joy, a small gathering of family and close friends. Their wedding, however, was meticulously planned over months. They chose an elegant venue in downtown Toronto, complete with floral arrangements, a live band, and every detail reflecting Emma's vision of the perfect day. The atmosphere on the wedding day was one of celebration, laughter, and the promise of a future together. Guests commented on how radiant Emma looked in her dress and how handsome Lucas appeared, the quintessential happy couple ready to begin their new life. From the outside, it seemed flawless. But as with many stories that end in tragedy, appearances can be deceiving. Subtle signs of tension existed, small cracks hidden beneath the polished exterior. Friends noted that Lucas was unusually particular about Emma's appearance, often commenting on how she presented herself, sometimes jokingly, sometimes with an intensity that went unnoticed by most. Emma, like many brides, had spent hours preparing her look for the wedding, her hair styled perfectly, her makeup applied with meticulous care, and her dress arranged just so. She wanted everything to be flawless. The couple's relationship had its ordinary ups and downs, like any young couple, but nothing friends or family noticed seemed alarming. They had joked about starting their life together, moving into a shared apartment, and planning trips across Canada. Yet behind the smiles and laughter, Emma occasionally felt a subtle unease, a fleeting sense that Lucas's reactions could be unpredictable, small moments that she dismissed in the excitement of wedding planning. On the evening of the wedding, the ceremony went off without a hitch. Guests showered the couple with love, photographs captured moments of joy, and the reception was filled with dancing and celebration. Lucas seemed attentive, proud, and affectionate, often complimenting Emma on her appearance, yet there lingered a faint tension whenever private moments arose. Some family members later recounted that Lucas appeared unusually anxious during the final preparations, checking and rechecking details as if something was amiss, but no one could have imagined the significance of these observations. As night fell and the celebration drew to a close, Emma and Lucas retired to their honeymoon suite in a luxury hotel downtown. The suite was lavish, dimly lit with soft chandeliers, a king-sized bed adorned with fresh flowers, and a cityscape view through expansive windows. To an outsider, it was the perfect scene for a newlywed couple to begin their life together. Yet within the suite, the atmosphere was subtly charged, the culmination of a day filled with celebration, anticipation, and societal pressures set the stage for the events that would unfold. The timeline leading up to the tragedy was simple, almost ordinary. The couple laughed, reminisced about the day, and toasted to their new life. But a single moment, a moment that may have seemed trivial or fleeting, would shatter the entire evening. One unguarded glance, one observation, one reaction would ignite a chain of events so shocking that it would reverberate far beyond the hotel walls. The night that began with joy and love would soon spiral into a sequence of violence and heartbreak, leaving friends, family, and the nation struggling to comprehend how the happiest day of Emma and Lucas's lives ended in the most devastating way imaginable. Emma Sinclair and Lucas Porter's story, at first glance, seemed like the kind of love story people often imagine. Two people who found each other, connected deeply, and chose to build a life together. Yet, beneath the surface of this picture-perfect relationship, subtle tensions and unspoken expectations had quietly begun to emerge. Little details that, in hindsight, foreshadowed the tragic events that would later unfold. Emma had always been meticulous about her appearance, a trait Lucas seemed to admire at first. But over time, what began as compliments occasionally turned into critiques, often wrapped in a joking tone, but carrying an edge that Emma sometimes felt. She had friends who noticed Lucas's focus on her looks, his insistence that everything she wore, every hairstyle, and every element of her presentation be flawless. To outsiders, this might have seemed harmless, even endearing. To Emma, however, it occasionally felt like a pressure she couldn't fully escape. In the months leading up to their wedding, Emma and Lucas shared countless moments of planning and excitement. They pored over invitations, tasted cakes, and debated over floral arrangements. On the surface, everything appeared joyous and ordinary, yet small inconsistencies began to creep in. Lucas would sometimes become unusually quiet when decisions didn't go his way. Emma noticed fleeting moments of irritation in his expressions, subtle shifts in tone that suggested something more than the typical stress of wedding planning. She brushed these off, attributing them to nerves or exhaustion. Beyond the planning, there were the moments they shared privately. Emma cherished her personal routine, morning runs, skincare rituals, quiet moments with friends. Lucas, however, seemed increasingly invested in monitoring these routines. Little comments about how she looked without makeup or the way she dressed casually began to appear more frequently. Emma, confident in herself but wanting to maintain harmony, often laughed off these remarks. Yet the accumulation of subtle judgments began to create a tension that neither fully acknowledged. The night before the wedding, Emma confided in a close friend about a fleeting sense of apprehension. "Lucas seems different tonight," she said softly. "I can't explain it. It's like he's distracted or maybe anxious. I don't know." Her friend, brushing it off, reassured her that pre-wedding nerves were normal. But in retrospect, this small sense of unease would later take on a chilling significance, a precursor to the night's shocking outcome. The wedding day itself, however, seemed to wash away most of these concerns. The ceremony was beautiful, the reception lively and full of joy. Guests commented on Emma's radiant smile and Lucas's proud demeanor. They laughed, danced, and celebrated as a community, unaware that the final moments of the day would mark the beginning of a horrific sequence. Behind closed doors, away from the eyes of family and friends, the atmosphere subtly shifted. The private moments in the suite carried a tension that would soon escalate beyond anyone's comprehension. As the couple prepared for their honeymoon suite, there was a fleeting calm, a sense that the hardest part of planning was over, and they could now focus entirely on each other. Yet, the weight of expectations, both internal and external, had accumulated over weeks. Lucas's intense focus on Emma's appearance, coupled with his perfectionist tendencies, had created an invisible pressure that Emma was unaware had reached a breaking point. The honeymoon suite was lavish, serene, and meticulously arranged. The city lights cast a warm glow through the windows, and soft music played in the background. To any observer, it was a scene of romance and celebration. Yet behind the scenes, subtle cues hinted at an impending eruption. Lucas's attention was divided between the celebration and his fixation on how Emma looked, even after hours of makeup, hairstyling, and preparation. Emma, exhausted but happy, believed she had fulfilled every expectation, unaware that Lucas's perception was already diverging from reality. The emotional motivations were layered and complex. Emma sought joy, love, and affirmation after months of preparation. Lucas, on the other hand, seemed increasingly influenced by idealized standards and a fragile sense of control over his environment. These dynamics, ordinary in isolation, combined to create a volatile mix. In the quiet, private moments before the tragic night, the tension between expectation and reality began to manifest, laying the groundwork for the shocking and irreversible events that would soon unfold. The honeymoon suite was meant to be a sanctuary, a private space for Emma and Lucas to celebrate the beginning of their marriage. The soft glow of the city lights reflected through the large windows, illuminating the carefully arranged flowers, the silky sheets, and the delicate touches Emma had imagined for months. Candles flickered across the room, casting gentle shadows, and the faint sound of music drifted from the speakers, creating an atmosphere that seemed almost magical. To anyone looking in, it was the perfect scene for a newlywed couple, romantic, serene, and full of promise. Emma entered the suite with a radiant smile, still flush from the day's excitement. Lucas followed, carrying a small bouquet he had secretly prepared, a gesture meant to express love and admiration. At first, everything appeared normal. The couple laughed softly, reminiscing about moments from the wedding ceremony, joking about awkward dance moves, and discussing plans for their honeymoon. But beneath the surface, subtle tensions began to emerge, almost imperceptibly. Lucas's demeanor, which had seemed calm and affectionate throughout the day, now carried a quiet intensity. He lingered on Emma's appearance, noting the natural look of her face without makeup. Emma, exhausted but trusting, laughed off his comments, thinking them playful, light-hearted banter. Yet there was a sharpness to his gaze, a scrutiny that Emma had not noticed before. He commented on minor details, how her hair fell, the slight smudge of eyeliner, and each remark, while small in isolation, seemed to compound in weight. Emma sensed a change in the atmosphere, though she couldn't articulate why. The warmth of the room seemed to shift. The laughter faded into awkward silences. She reached out to hold Lucas's hand, attempting to bridge the growing distance, but he pulled back subtly, his expression unreadable. This small gesture, so ordinary under normal circumstances, was a sign of the underlying tension building, unnoticed by most, yet critical in hindsight. The couple attempted to enjoy the evening, to cling to the joy and celebration of the day. But every movement, every glance carried unspoken meaning. Lucas's attention to detail, once an expression of care, now felt like judgment. Emma tried to maintain composure, reminding herself that he had loved her all day, that they had shared moments of laughter and connection. Yet, as the minutes passed, Lucas's reactions became increasingly unpredictable. A small smile would appear, quickly replaced by a frown. A casual remark from Emma would trigger a sharp, almost imperceptible critique. The oscillation between affection and tension created a subtle unease, a quiet sense that something in the night was not as it should be. Guests and friends had long since left the reception, leaving the couple alone in the suite. The silence of the city outside seemed to amplify every sound, the rustle of fabric, the distant hum of traffic, the faint flicker of candles. Emma, attempting to lighten the mood, suggested they toast with champagne, celebrating their union and the life ahead. Lucas reluctantly agreed, but his focus remained fixated, not on the celebration, but on Emma's appearance. The contrast between the expected joy of the night and the reality of his obsessive attention created a tension that grew by the minute. Moments that might have been trivial, Emma adjusting her dress, laughing at a small joke, brushing her hair back from her face, now seemed to escalate Lucas's agitation. His internal perception, distorted by expectations and perfectionism, interpreted ordinary actions as deliberate offenses. Emma, sensing the shift but unsure why, attempted reassurance, gently explaining her choices, smiling warmly, hoping to ease the growing tension. Yet her words, meant to comfort, did little to alter the trajectory. The quiet room, illuminated by candlelight and city reflections, became a stage for a tragedy that had been quietly assembling throughout the day. Every glance, every comment, every small movement became charged with meaning far beyond its intention. Lucas's frustration, initially subtle, was now visible in the tension of his jaw, the tightness of his hands, and the quickness of his responses. Emma, still unaware of the full scope of his emotional state, continued to engage with warmth and affection, believing that love and patience could bridge the invisible gap widening between them. The climax of the evening, when ordinary expectations collided with distorted perception, was imminent. A simple, human moment, Emma revealing her natural, makeup-free face, acted as the catalyst for a reaction that would shatter the night. What had begun as a joyful, celebratory evening slowly transformed into a scene of escalating confrontation, a quiet buildup of tension that, in hindsight, left subtle warning signs. The small frown, the withdrawn gesture, the sharp critique disguised as concern. As the night wore on, the quiet tension in the suite grew almost tangible. What had started as subtle unease between Emma and Lucas now evolved into a more pronounced and ominous energy. The couple, once smiling and exchanging whispered words of affection, found themselves trapped in a private, escalating confrontation that no one could have foreseen. The city lights outside the windows cast long shadows across the room, dancing across the walls as if silently mirroring the unease inside. Every movement, every glance, carried the weight of impending catastrophe. Lucas's reactions had intensified, and Emma began to sense that his emotional state was no longer rational. Small gestures she had always taken for granted, adjusting her hair, smiling naturally, or simply moving around the suite, now seemed to ignite his anger. Lucas's perception had shifted. Ordinary actions were interpreted as challenges or provocations. Emma, still trying to navigate the delicate balance, attempted to speak calmly, to reassure him, to diffuse the tension. Her words, however, seemed only to amplify his fixation, creating an invisible storm that neither could escape. The first moments of physical confrontation occurred almost imperceptibly. A hand raised in frustration, a sharp gesture misinterpreted, a command spoken with unintended harshness. These small interactions were the tinder that would ignite a fire too powerful to control. Emma, sensing danger, but not fully understanding the scope, froze, attempting to appeal to reason. Lucas, overwhelmed by an obsessive fixation on appearances and expectations, acted impulsively. One impulsive action, a momentary loss of control, set off a chain reaction that would turn the suite from a space of intimacy and celebration into a scene of horror. Neighbors in the surrounding hotel suites later recalled faint, indistinct sounds, a sudden crash, muffled cries, and a sharp, terrifying commotion that punctuated the otherwise quiet night. Yet by the time help arrived, the echoes of the event had already begun to fade, leaving only the aftermath for investigators to piece together. Hotel staff, responding to the alarm, found the scene shocking and incomprehensible, a stark contrast to the joyful evening they had observed just hours earlier. The suite, which had held romance and promise, was now a chilling testament to how quickly life can shift from ordinary to catastrophic. Forensic evidence later revealed the rapid sequence of events in painstaking detail. Each action, reaction, and movement was reconstructed by investigators to establish the timeline. The tragedy unfolded in mere minutes, yet in those fleeting moments, the consequences were irreversible. Emma's attempts to calm, reason, and redirect the situation were met with escalating aggression, and Lucas's impulsive reactions culminated in an act that would forever mark the night as a moment of unspeakable horror. The immediate aftermath was a blur of chaos, disbelief, and fear. Hotel personnel, emergency responders, and later investigators struggled to comprehend how a night of celebration could transform so rapidly into tragedy. Witness accounts, though fragmented and limited, described Lucas as appearing dazed, conflicted, and almost disoriented after the event, a man caught between the enormity of what he had done and the reality of the irreversible consequences. Emma's lifeless body, tragically and violently taken, left an indelible mark on all who entered that room. The public reaction, once the news became known, was one of shock, disbelief, and horror. Friends and family grappled with the unimaginable. A day meant for love and union had ended in destruction. Social media and news outlets spread the story rapidly, highlighting both the shocking nature of the act and the apparent ordinary circumstances that preceded it. Questions flooded in from all sides. How could such an impulsive act occur? Were there warning signs missed? What drove Lucas to commit this irreversible act in the private confines of what should have been a sacred, joyful night? Investigators, piecing together the evidence, noted patterns that hinted at an escalating internal struggle within Lucas. His intense focus on Emma's appearance, combined with an underlying perfectionism and inability to process unexpected deviations from his ideal, created a mental state where a single perceived deviation triggered catastrophic action. The forensic timeline revealed that the tragedy unfolded in a matter of minutes, with each successive moment amplifying the intensity and reducing the opportunity for intervention. The morning after the tragedy, the quiet streets surrounding the hotel in Toronto were filled with an eerie stillness. News of the incident had begun to circulate, and the media quickly descended upon the area. Police tape cordoned off the hotel, marking the suite where the shocking events had occurred. For law enforcement, the scene was as baffling as it was tragic. What had begun as a simple domestic situation had escalated into a violent, fatal encounter in a matter of minutes. Every detail would need to be meticulously examined to understand how such a catastrophic event could unfold so quickly. Detectives assigned to the case, led by veteran investigator Sergeant Adrian Matthews, arrived at the scene within the hour. Matthews, known for his methodical approach, immediately recognized the complexity of the situation. On the surface, the case appeared straightforward, a fatal act carried out in a private suite. But the subtle details, the placement of objects, minor injuries, and the sequence of interactions suggested a deeper, more intricate story. The first step was to document every element, from the exact position of furniture to the smallest marks on the walls and floor. Hotel staff were interviewed extensively. They recounted hearing muffled noises late at night, initially dismissing them as a normal argument or playful banter between guests. Some had even reported a faint crash, the sound of something falling, but no one had immediately realized its significance. These seemingly minor observations would later prove crucial in reconstructing the timeline of events. Investigators also reviewed hotel security footage, noting the couple's interactions as they entered the suite, any visitors, and movements in and out of the room. Even the smallest gestures, an anxious glance, a hesitation at the door, were analyzed for insight into the mental and emotional state of Lucas in those critical moments. Forensic specialists arrived to examine the suite in painstaking detail. The evidence painted a chilling picture: items displaced, traces of struggle, and subtle indications of escalating tension that had culminated in the fatal act. Each piece of evidence required careful interpretation. For example, marks on the walls suggested sudden, forceful movement. Objects knocked over revealed the intensity of the confrontation, and fingerprints and DNA samples were meticulously catalogued. Experts also analyzed blood spatter patterns to determine the sequence of events, revealing the shocking speed and immediacy of the tragedy. Witness accounts were fragmented but provided essential insights. Neighbors described hearing brief, sharp sounds, screams cut off abruptly, followed by unsettling silence. Hotel employees noted that Lucas appeared unusually calm when leaving the suite after the incident, but with a rigid tension in his posture and a distant look in his eyes. Friends of Emma and Lucas, contacted by authorities, described subtle warning signs they had noticed in the days leading up to the wedding. Lucas's occasional fixation on Emma's appearance, his meticulous insistence on perfection, and fleeting episodes of irritability. These details, seemingly innocuous in isolation, began to form a pattern that investigators could not ignore. The investigation also uncovered digital footprints that offered clues to the couple's private interactions. Text messages and social media exchanges were analyzed, revealing a relationship marked by affection, but also undercurrents of tension. Lucas's messages, while loving in tone, occasionally contained subtle criticism or emphasis on Emma's looks. Emma's replies often expressed reassurance, patience, or humor, suggesting a desire to maintain harmony despite minor disagreements. Combined with witness observations, these digital traces provided investigators with a nuanced understanding of the dynamics that may have contributed to the night's catastrophic outcome. As the investigation progressed, alternative theories and conflicting reports emerged. Some speculated that the act was premeditated, fueled by a hidden motive. Others suggested it was a momentary lapse of judgment, an impulsive reaction amplified by emotional instability. Experts in psychology and criminal behavior were brought in to assess Lucas's mental state, examining personality traits, stress levels, and possible triggers that could have led to the violent act. They analyzed patterns of obsessive behavior, fixation on perfection, and inability to process perceived deviations from expectation, all contributing factors that could explain the sudden escalation. The twists in the investigation were both surprising and chilling. Evidence emerged that contradicted initial assumptions. Minor injuries on Lucas suggested self-defense attempts or struggles to regain control. Items initially overlooked revealed moments of hesitation and confusion. And inconsistencies in witness statements required careful reconciliation. Every revelation, every twist, added layers to the story, demonstrating that the tragedy was not a simple sequence of events, but a complex interplay of emotion, perception, and impulsive action. By the end of this phase of the investigation, it was clear that understanding the tragedy required more than a simple explanation. It demanded a careful, methodical reconstruction of every decision, every glance, every word exchanged between Emma and Lucas in those final moments. The investigation was far from complete, and each twist revealed the delicate, dangerous interplay of expectation, perception, and impulsive action. The shockwaves from that tragic night rippled far beyond the walls of the hotel suite. Families, friends, and the broader Canadian community struggled to comprehend how an evening meant for love and celebration had ended in such unimaginable devastation. Emma Sinclair, remembered by all as vibrant, loving, and full of life, had her future stolen in an instant, leaving a void that could never be filled. Lucas Porter, once seen as charming and devoted, now became the focus of a criminal investigation, public scrutiny, and widespread media attention. The trial that followed was both sensational and deeply troubling. Courtrooms in Toronto became the stage for a story that captivated the nation. Legal teams meticulously reconstructed the events of the night, presenting evidence in excruciating detail. Witnesses were called to testify. Hotel staff described the subtle noises and disturbances from the suite. Friends and family recounted the relationship dynamics, highlighting both the affection and the subtle tensions that had existed prior to the wedding. Psychologists offered expert analysis on Lucas's mental state, providing insight into how a sudden loss of control, coupled with obsessive tendencies and rigid expectations, could manifest into an act of irreversible violence. Forensic evidence played a pivotal role in the courtroom. Investigators had meticulously documented every detail of the suite: fingerprints, blood spatter patterns, dislodged objects, and the exact positioning of the couple at the moment of the incident. Each item told a part of the story, slowly revealing the sequence of events leading to the tragedy. The prosecution painted a picture of a man overwhelmed by obsession and expectation, whose inability to reconcile reality with an idealized vision culminated in a moment of explosive action. The defense, meanwhile, focused on the impulsive nature of the act, suggesting that emotional instability and lack of prior intent mitigated the severity of premeditation. As the trial progressed, twists and nuances emerged. Character witnesses described Lucas as affectionate, loving, and seemingly devoted, creating a stark contrast to the violent act he had committed. Friends of Emma recounted the small signs that had hinted at underlying tension: Lucas's frequent comments on Emma's appearance, his meticulous nature, and his occasional rigidity. These elements, while subtle, became central to understanding the psychological backdrop against which the tragedy occurred. The courtroom drama also explored the emotional toll on both families. Emma's relatives, overwhelmed with grief, recounted the dreams, plans, and aspirations that had been abruptly extinguished. Every memory, every anecdote shared in court highlighted the profound loss, not just of a life, but of the potential and promise that Emma embodied. Lucas's family, meanwhile, faced their own turmoil, grappling with the reality that a loved one had committed an unthinkable act, forever altering multiple lives. Psychologists and criminal behavior experts dissected the complex interplay of obsession, expectation, and emotional instability. Lucas's fixation on an idealized version of his wife's appearance, combined with underlying perfectionism and an inability to process deviations from expectation, provided insight into how the seemingly ordinary could escalate into a catastrophic moment. In the courtroom, these expert analyses helped the jury understand not only what happened, but why it had happened, providing context for a tragedy that initially appeared senseless. Despite the exhaustive proceedings, questions lingered. Could anyone have intervened? Were there signs missed that might have prevented the outcome? The trial, while offering legal closure in terms of verdict and sentencing, could not erase the emotional scars left on those involved. Every detail, from forensic analysis to witness testimony, served as a reminder of the fragility of human relationships and the catastrophic consequences that can result from unaddressed tension and obsession. The final verdict, when delivered, brought a sense of resolution but did not alleviate the lingering questions. The court concluded the act was a combination of impulsive action and psychological breakdown, yet the emotional impact resonated far beyond legal determinations. Families mourned, communities reflected, and the public continued to grapple with the horror of what had occurred in a space that had been intended for love and celebration. The tragedy of Emma Sinclair and Lucas Porter extends far beyond the courtroom and the confines of the hotel suite where that horrific night unfolded. In reflecting on this story, the emotional and psychological implications are profound, offering a sobering examination of human behavior, relationships, and the dangers of unaddressed tension. While the legal system delivered a verdict, the lessons lie in the subtler dynamics that preceded the tragedy, dynamics that could, if recognized, serve as warnings for others. One of the most important reflections is the danger inherent in obsession over ideals. Lucas's fixation on Emma's appearance, particularly his expectation of perfection, created an invisible pressure cooker that neither he nor Emma fully acknowledged. To outsiders, his concern may have seemed minor, even trivial, a passing remark or a casual critique. Yet the accumulation of these small expectations can form an emotional environment fraught with tension. For Emma, navigating this subtle, ongoing judgment was a challenge, but in the absence of explicit conflict or confrontation, the underlying anxiety remained largely invisible to anyone outside the relationship. This tragedy also highlights the fragility of human relationships under pressure. Even couples who appear outwardly perfect, as Emma and Lucas did, can have hidden vulnerabilities. The honeymoon night, intended to celebrate love, union, and the promise of shared life, became a focal point where minor insecurities and expectations collided with emotional instability, resulting in catastrophic consequences. It serves as a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that the unseen pressures in a relationship may carry dangerous potential if not addressed proactively. Psychological experts analyzing cases like this often emphasize the importance of recognizing early warning signs. Lucas exhibited obsessive tendencies, perfectionism, and a difficulty accepting deviations from his expectations. These behaviors, while subtle in social interactions, can escalate under stress or heightened emotional circumstances. Emma's attempts to reassure, maintain harmony, and preserve the joy of the moment, although natural and human, were ultimately insufficient against the intensity of Lucas's internal turmoil. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for anyone seeking to navigate relationships safely and responsibly. The emotional impact on friends, family, and the broader community is equally profound. Emma's loved ones were left grappling with unimaginable grief, mourning not only her loss, but also the potential of a life violently cut short. Lucas's family, meanwhile, faced a different kind of anguish, the realization that someone they loved had become the agent of such irreversible harm. For the public observing this story unfold, it serves as both a cautionary tale and an invitation to reflect on human fragility, the dangers of unchecked obsession, and the critical importance of emotional awareness. Moreover, the story underscores the hazards of idealizing expectations within intimate relationships. The pressures we place on ourselves or others, whether regarding appearance, behavior, or adherence to imagined standards, can quietly erode stability and sow seeds of conflict. While love and affection are central to any relationship, unresolved insecurities and rigid expectations can transform moments of vulnerability into triggers for destructive action. For Emma and Lucas, a simple act, Emma revealing her natural face after a long day of preparation, became the catalyst for a catastrophe that no one could have predicted externally, but which may have been silently gestating in the dynamics of their relationship. Finally, this story serves as a powerful reflection for audiences. It asks us to consider how we handle expectations, emotional control, and empathy in our own lives. It reminds us that love is fragile, that human behavior is complex, and that tragedy often arises from a combination of subtle pressures, emotional instability, and impulsive action. It prompts an unsettling yet necessary question. What can we do to prevent ordinary tensions from escalating into irreversible harm? As we close the chapter on the tragic story of Emma Sinclair and Lucas Porter, we are left with more questions than answers. A night meant for love became a nightmare that shattered lives, leaving an indelible mark on families, friends, and an entire community. Stories like this remind us how fragile life can be, how the smallest moments can carry unimaginable consequences, and how unseen pressures can transform ordinary interactions into catastrophic events. At Crime Depth 247, we bring you the deepest, most gripping narratives of real and fictional crimes, stories that challenge the mind and engage the heart. If this story left you reflecting, questioning, or captivated, subscribe to our channel to uncover more mysteries from around the world. Share your thoughts in the comments. What could have been done differently? Could this tragedy have been prevented? And explore our playlists to experience more tales that reveal the hidden dangers lurking behind seemingly ordinary lives. Remember, the world of crime is complex, shocking, and often unpredictable. But by understanding it, we can learn, reflect, and stay vigilant. Thank you for watching, and stay with Crime Depth 247 for more stories that explore the darkest corners of human experience.